The year was 1992, just about a few months after our government had announced liberalization and the beginning of economic reforms. And just a couple of years earlier than that, sometime in 1989 and 1990, Tata Steel had engaged a consultant, Arthur D. Little, to look at Tata Steel. And they came in and worked for a couple of years and produced a report in several volumes and several pages, probably over 1,000 pages. And a new CEO had just taken over, and Dr. Irani, my predecessor, had just taken over as the managing director of Tata Steel in 1992. While that report had lots of pages, the bottom line was very clear. The bottom line said that, look, you Tata Steel, you are about to die. Because your technology is old, your equipment is old, your business processes are outdated, you have no customer orientation, you have no decision-making capabilities, you are not even competitive locally, let alone be competitive globally. That is exactly what they said in 1992. And this new managing director could have easily put that huge volumes of report under the bottommost drawer and pretended as if nothing has happened and let's try and see what can be done. But he didn't do that. He actually shared that report with everybody in the organization. And a real serious journey began that day. And this journey is now 12 years old. And the journey, of course, is continuing. And in these 12 years, today, Tata Steel has become one of the most globally competitive steel companies in the whole world. Its products and services are better than most steel companies in the world. We are going global. We are on a growth path. And this major transformation over the last 10, 12 years has been through people. While many things were done, I just want to cite three key events that really shaped this transformation and resulted into what Tata Steel is today. The first one, in 1992 we were 80,000 people. And today if you are 80,000, you would be dead already. And we reduced that 80,000 to something like 40,000 over a 10-year period. Anywhere else, it wouldn't have been a major problem. We didn't do it the way McGregor did in British Steel way back some 30 years ago when he reduced some 50,000 people. When everybody was told that, look, you take 2 weeks' salary and get back home. Or we didn't do the way that Ford or IBM or General Motors could do in their countries. We are in India, where there is a huge level of unemployment, where people often don't have enough ends to meet, enough to meet their ends. We have labor laws which are unfriendly. It was also going to cost the company. And it required tremendous amount of courage on the part of CEO and other senior executives of the company to be able to take the decision of even reducing the number. And you're going to reduce, you needed to convince the people, you needed to convince the trade unions, the people who are going to be impacted by the decision. And therefore, I still recall, between 1992 to 1995, for 3 years, almost every fortnight, every 2-3 weeks, the CEO and the senior executives used to indulge in tremendous amount of communication with the workers, with the supervisors, with the union leadership, trying to tell them what the world around is looking like, what the global competition is looking like, what's going to happen if the numbers are going to be around 80,000 for all time to come. And it was a tremendous amount of work to be able to convince people who are indeed going to be affected. And it could not have been done if you couldn't get into the minds of people and into the minds of people who are actually going to get affected by the decision that you're going to take. That is what was done between 1995 and Even now it is continuing till about 2002. It was on a very massive scale, and now it is on a reduced scale. And now this one major decision of bringing down the number from 80,000 to around 40,000, and something which is, I think, unique in India, and which was done with the acceptance of the people who are actually going to leave the company, is, I think, a very, very remarkable achievement. And today, when we are talking about that we are a globally competitive company, and we can stand up to any competition from anywhere in the world, the basic foundation of that competitiveness actually came from this decision of getting into the minds of the people who are actually going to get affected by this major decision in the company. The second example, some years later, sometime in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, over a 2 or 3 year period, we underwent a program called the Performance Ethics Program. And as you all realize, and as you all will realize, that a company which goes through an administered era and an uncompetitive era for a long time, for several decades, really cannot have executives who are sharp and competitive, executives who can perform tasks in a competitive world. And we did have a large number of executives, some 5,000 odd executives, who have grown up over the years of in an administrative control regime that India has adopted for so many years. And we decided to go through a program called the Performance Ethics Program, where every job was assessed for its complexity, for its responsibility, for its accountability. Every single person in the company was assessed for his, not only for his functional skills, but also for his inherent skills of decision-making ability to take on stress, ability to empathize with people, leadership qualities, 12 or 13 inherent characteristics of human beings, which really sums up their capacity to, lead an organization at various levels. And jobs and people were matched. And there are many, many people, youngsters, who came up, and occupied higher responsibilities and higher positions. And equally large number of senior people were actually pushed down the hierarchy. And this is something which is quite unheard of in the Indian industry, and I have not seen anywhere else it happen. And this happened again, and this had to be done, because when you move from a traditional organization which has been in existence for many, many years in controlled era of an uncompetitive nature, and when you are preparing yourself for local and domestic and global competition, you had to do that. And there was a major upheavals in the company. And this major upheavals was handled through wonderful communication. Communication again of getting into the hearts of the people who are actually going to get affected by that decision. And I believe when we are talking about transformation of people and transformation of organizations through people, it is very important to create the genuineness. It is very important to communicate in a very, very genuine way as to what exactly are you trying to do, without any malaise and without being unfair and being totally genuine and fair. Let me give you a third example which Arun Maira referred to in his opening remarks. As the organization kept on improving over the last decade, we came into 2001, 2002, when the company started making better profits. The company's products and services were improving better and better, and we were reaching better than anybody else in India, somewhere around global standards. We had not reached the global standard yet, both in quality, service and profitability. We said we must sit down, all of us, and create a vision for the organization as to what is this organization going to look like in the next 5 years. And I remember calling Arun Maira one day to Jamshedpur, and we all sat down for 2 or 3 days, some 30, 40 of us, and dreamt about the company. And we put some strawman ideas on pieces of paper. But I wasn't very satisfied with that alone, because if you want to create a vision for the organization, the process of creating a vision has to be a shared one, and which creates passion amongst people. And we therefore decided to put these strawman ideas into this company-wide intranet over a period of 3-4 months. And we invited suggestions from a variety of people. And you won't believe, we got something like 10,000 suggestions. And out of those 10,000, some 5,000-6,000 were from workers and supervisors as to what they thought should be the vision of the company. Of course, later on, these 10,000 pieces were assembled and massaged and put together in a couple of sessions as the Vision 2007, because 2007 is the 100th year of Tata Steel. And the vision that we created for ourselves is something which no other steel company in the world has ever achieved, which is to create shareholder value. Over a long periods of time, steel industry has been a destroyer of value. There is no steel company in the world which over a consistent period of time has created shareholder value. And therefore we said Tata Steel must become an EVA positive company by the year 2007. Of course, the vision has two parts. The other part being something that we are all Tatas and Tata Steel has always been started with, which is to continue to improve the quality of life of its employees and the society that we serve. So this EVA positive, the process that the whole organization went through, this huge number of people, 10,000 people giving suggestions and sharing it with 40,000 people, the process of creating the vision was far more important than the vision itself. It was not a vision that was shared with people. It was a vision that came as a shared vision from the people of the organization. And therefore there was a tremendous excitement in the organization. And in the very first year of creating this vision, the company actually became EVA positive. Of course, steel prices helped us to become EVA positive. But I often think that it is the will of this and the passion of these 40,000 people that made what happened in the marketplace also possible. And you really have to see and believe the passion and the feverishness with which this whole exercise was done through the entire organization. And from that time onwards, one could see a very major change in the mindset of people. Everybody wants to stretch themselves beyond what they have done yesterday. Everybody wants to set themselves, extraordinary goals. And there is a total freedom from failure. If somebody failed in meeting extraordinary targets, nobody was going to take them to task. If somebody did not keep himself extraordinary targets and kept himself ordinary targets and exceeded, he was not going to be applauded. And this whole exercise of this creating the vision, I believe, is the one that is really making Tata Steel tick today. Because every time we sit down to make a plan, every time we sit down to think of the future, one can see even the ordinary worker knows what is the vision of the company is. And the visions of the companies are not made in the boardrooms. The visions of the company are not made by the managing director and a few executive directors on the board. And if you want to transform an organization from taking it from an ordinary performance or from a good company to a great company, you need to involve the entire organization and make it passionate to do what they want to do. That is what I saw in this vision exercise. It is not merely a statement that you come out after a period of time. It is a process that you go through in formulating the vision. I give you 3 examples from the company, but I want to give you a couple of examples from outside the company in which the company is involved. We all must remember that India is a developing country. India is not this 250 million middle class and the upper middle class population. India is really the 1 billion people who are not all that well-to-do and who live in villages. And I believe that unlike Western corporate world, the Indian corporate world has a much larger responsibility. The Indian corporates not only have the responsibility of transforming their own organizations through their own people, but they have a responsibility of transforming the society through their own people. And it is a very important dimension of a corporate function. And let me give you two examples. In Jamshedpur, just like in any other city of India, in any other town of India, there are schools. There are some good schools and there are bad schools and there are some indifferent schools. Sometime about a year and a half back, we decided that we will impact on the process of education in various schools in Jamshedpur. We have a division in the company called the Business Excellence Division, which facilitates the process of business excellence in the company as per the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. And we have our own Tata Business Excellence model. And Malcolm Baldrige has an educational excellence model. And we adopted that educational excellence model. And some 2 years ago, we introduced it in a number of schools in Jamshedpur, some 20 or 30 schools in Jamshedpur. And there are a number of people who are a bit skeptical whether schools will adopt this. Because teaching is a process. Imparting knowledge is a process. And that process has several elements. And what our people do is actually go and work with the various schools in Jamshedpur to see how the process of education can be improved. Because education is fundamental to India. And if we who have leadership in process don't impact on the process of education or for that matter anything else that happens in society, I believe we are failing in our responsibility. And in the last 1 year, I can see some major changes happening in the educational quality in Jamshedpur. And a second example from outside the company. We are in Jharkhand. Jamshedpur is in Jharkhand. Jamshedpur is a tribal state. It's dominated by tribals. And we are all sitting on tribal lands or lands which are originally owned by the tribals. And I believe we we have a responsibility towards their well-being. And some time ago, between Tata Steel and the XLRI in Jamshedpur and the government of Jharkhand, we started an institute called the Tribal Education Center, where every year we pick up about 40-50 boys and girls and prepare them for competitive examinations, where Tata Steel has provided certain infrastructure and educational facilities, and the XLRI faculty at free of cost come and teach the students. I go there quite often. And I can see a remarkable difference. When we selected them on day one, these tribal students didn't have confidence. And they didn't have the wherewithal to face the world. And in just 1 year time, they are as good as any one of us. And you cannot distinguish a tribal girl or a boy who has been through that college for a year from any one of us or any one of you sitting in this hall. And it gave us and it gave me a tremendous amount of satisfaction that we have been able to impact on that society. Any transformation, whether the transformation is through people in your own organization or transformation in the society, is a matter of transforming things through people. And as I said, Indian corporates have a very much larger responsibility of not only transforming their own organization through their own people, but also impacting on the transformation of the society through its people. And which is why I often tell my people, I often tell students, I often tell the people whom I talk to, that when you go to shop next time, whether you buy a toothpaste or whether you buy a soap, or whether you buy steel or whether you buy a steel furniture for that matter, you should of course look at the price tag, you should look at the quality. But I think you should also ask yourself the question, what is this kind of organization that has produced this product that I am wanting to buy? And that question will trigger many things in India. And that is what we should be doing in this country. Thank you.